What's going on, everyone? Welcome to a Thursday edition of GDT Live, presented by the Game Day Tires podcast. My name's Dayton Camo. Alongside me today, Colton Davies. We've got a good one. Colton this morning was able to talk with ex-NHLer Nate Thompson. He's been around the league. He had some great stories to share with Colton dating back to his junior days. So great stuff there from Nate. We're going to get to that in a few minutes. But first, there's a couple things this morning that we wanted to talk about. The biggest thing, I think, we talked about this the other day, the World Junior Selection Camp for the Summer Showcase. Mm-hmm. Now they've announced coaches and their management, something that people have been waiting for ever since after the World Juniors this year, when it was announced that Canada would be going for a full-time management team. People weren't too happy with Dave Cameron and his performance at the last World Juniors. So I think Mark Hunter and Dale Hunter of the London Knights will be doing a much better job going forward. And I think these two people are fit for junior hockey. They've been living junior hockey for ever since I've been alive and even prior to that. So I think great selection by Hockey Canada here. What do you think about this selection, Colton?
You can't go wrong with the Hunters being involved, I don't think. The only kind of issue I have is isn't there a guy in Moncton who's like a really good coach that probably could have coached this team?
Right. So I believe to coach a Hockey Canada program, or at least the World Juniors, you at least have to have 2 years of coaching in the CHL, which Gardner McDougall does not. He coached this past year in Moncton, and he also coached St. John in 2021-2022.
But that doesn't.
He joined the team only for the Memorial Cup. So unfortunately, I don't think Gardner McDougall is qualified. Like, obviously he's qualified, but he doesn't meet Hockey Canada's criteria. Yeah, that's the word I was looking for. Yeah, so obviously the next best, Dale Hunter and Mark Hunter. Yeah, and I don't even know if you'd call them the next best, because you look at the list of achievements and everything that they've done the past couple of years, especially this past year with the London winning the Memorial Cup. I think the Hunters are a pretty good choice. But with that being said, I don't think it would be a surprise if we saw the McDougalls in the same spot down the near future.
Yeah, down the road for sure. I think that's definitely a possibility. With Hunter being announced, of course, there's going to be some big changes within Hockey Canada and how they're going to format this roster going forward. But I think some names to kind of keep an eye on, obviously, are Gavin McKenna. He's a lock to make this team. Michael Misa, Tisha Ginla, who else? Carter Bear, Roger McQueen, maybe as well. You can think of, like, those are all just centers, right? Like, there's lists up everywhere, or those are all wingers, sorry. But like Berkeley Catton, he probably makes the team. Keaton Verhoff will have a chance. Matthew Schaefer, if he's not in the NHL, like, this team will be good. Don't get me wrong. It's just going to be
I saw
under Hunter.
I saw a picture of the USA roster, and it was nothing special. You know what I mean? Like last year, the last few years, you look at that USA roster, and they've got guys like the BC trio, Smith, Perreault, and Leonard. They had those guys alongside Lane Hudson. I think, and the goaltending, Hildebrandt.
Well, they had Cole Hudson last year, but yeah.
Well, no, I'm talking like when they had like the BC trio.
Oh yes, like, okay, gotcha.
Smith, Leonard, Perreault, and then Hudson. Guys like Isaac Howard as well. Like that team, Snuggerud. I could go on and on. That team was amazing.
Yeah.
But let's go down the list here. I have it right in front of me. Let's read some names on the USA 2025 World Junior Summer Showcase roster.
And I think one thing quickly is, like, just remember, like, for people watching and stuff, like, it's just a summer showcase. So not all the elite players are going to be invited. There's already guaranteed locks with guys like Hagens, etc. So when these rosters come out, it's more about finding other players that can kind of, fit in and can come to that main camp in December. But yeah, go for it. Read off some names.
So the first one in the goaltending category, it sticks out. Jackson Parsons, 6'4", CHL goaltender of the year. And then the rest of them, Nick Kemp, Cam Hendrickson, Caleb Hale, and Patrick Quinlan. Quinlan is the only one that really sticks out to me. And then your defensemen. This is where it kind of gets interesting. You've got guys like Henry Brustevich, EJ Emery, Blake Fiddler, Logan Hensler, Cole Hudson, Adam Kleber, Jacob Rombach, and there's also others, but those are the names that stick out. And then you get down to the forwards, and it's kind of dwindling down in terms of high-end talent, high-end names. Obviously, there's guys like Trevor Connolly and Cole Eiserman, James Haggins, Riker Lee, LJ Mooney, Will Moore, Max Plant, AJ Spalacy, Brody Zemer, Will Zellers, but like there's no top end guy. Like you look at Canada's roster and you've got guys like, well, the first one that comes out to me is Gavin McKenna, and he's a top end player. Usually when you go to a junior tournament and you're a high end team, there's usually that one player that kind of sticks out. Most world junior teams have, I mean, sometimes it's because you're a Switzerland or a Czechia and you don't have very many, but sometimes there's teams like the Sweden with Axel Sandin Pellikka last year. He was their standout guy. With Finland a couple years ago, it was Atarutu and guys like that. So like they've always have guys that stand out, but this USA team doesn't have a standout for me.
Higgins.
He's not a standout. I think he proved it this year. Maybe some people call him a fall off, or call it a fall off. What he did this year at BC didn't produce as much, but to me, if you're a top end talent guy like that, and you're supposed to be producing, or the scouts said you were supposed to be producing at a high level, I think you should be able to at least carry that into the NCAA. Yeah, I know it was his freshman year. He's a little bit smaller, but I think if you're looked at as a top end guy, you'll find ways to put pucks in the back of the net.
I saw something that, so he put up whatever it was, like 40 points or something this past year, Higgins. I can't remember the exact totals, but
I think it was 37.
Okay, so somebody had said on Twitter X there that think about if James Higgins had gone and played, because they were talking about the diminish of his stats, and did he really have a terrible season? No, not at all. He was point per game, etc. So like, okay, cool. But if he would have gone to the OHL and played with London, he would have had 110 points this year with his eyes closed. Like, that's just like, he's a good player, but I think that you're right in a sense that this season was a bit harder for him as it was his freshman year. I still think, in my opinion, he's the standout player for the U.S. and will be that guy. But you know who else I look to on that U.S. roster? That's the American sniper, Cole Eiserman. I think Eiserman can be a game changer for the U.S. and we'll see what happens, of course. But that's a guy that I've really grown to like. I really like what Cole Eiserman can do. He's their American sniper.
Yeah, I like that. I like that comparison, but I just think the last year when like he was used more as a role player on the World Junior team.
Sure.
Maybe this year would be his breakout year of the World Juniors, give him a little bit more responsibility, a little bit more leeway out there on the ice. But I don't know. Last year they played Eiserman in such a role player position, and he was only out there for certain moments on the power play, near the end of the power play, or for the penalty kill. I don't know. You could be on something here with Cole Eiserman. He could be in for a breakout season.
And I mean, Cole Hudson's still there too, right? So that's the elite defenseman that the U.S. have. So
I would honestly say that he is their standout.
Yeah, for sure.
Honestly, I think I might say that.
So there you go. Yeah, there you go. You can walk back your statement earlier where they don't really have one. But I get what you're saying in sense of like they don't have like that generational athlete or whatever, right? Like Canada had Connor Bedard and then Gavin McKenna, of course, Macklin Celebrini, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, I get it. I get what you're saying for sure. But I still think the U.S. is going to be a dominant, back-to-back golds, right? Can they go for triple?
That's going to be tough. That's going to be tough, especially they're on home soil. They're in Minnesota, the state of hockey. It literally doesn't get much more American
Yeah,
hockey than this.
where's Willie when you need him?
Yeah, Willie, get into the chat here. Anyways, I the thing I have to say about the U.S. is that they're not the most skilled, but if they can take this and use that home crowd to their momentum and maybe get like they're gonna make it past the quarterfinals. It's the Americans. They're on home soil. You know
Yeah,
that.
totally.
If they get a semifinal matchup against Canada or Sweden, they have to use the crowd.
Yeah, I get that for sure. Should we throw it to Nate Thompson?
Yeah, everyone, Colton. Well, like we said before, got the chance to talk to Nate Thompson earlier today. I was out. I was at work, but Colton did a great job with this one, so we'll throw to that right now.
Welcome in everyone to GDT Live. We've got Nate Thompson, former NHLer. He played over 800 NHL games. He also played for the Seattle Thunderbirds in the Western Hockey League. Very excited to get to chat with you today, Nate. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. Just glad to be out here and finally get to chat with you about some good hockey.
Yeah. So let's rewind to your WHL days. That's what we were just kind of going to talk about. You played for the Seattle Thunderbirds back when the time when the WHL was crazy, obviously. What do you remember? First, let's start with how does the transition from Alaska to Seattle happen? How was that for you?
It was good. I mean, it was at the time I was about 15, 16 when I was having Western League teams look at me, and then Seattle came to the forefront. And I actually, at the time, I was debating on going to the national development team program for my under 18 year, and it would have lined up, and then I ended up going to Seattle for would have been my first 17-year-old season, and that's kind of how it came to about. And I think just people from Alaska, it's kind of been half and half, where guys go to college or they go to the to the CHL. So that's kind of how it transpired. And I think for me, I was I really wanted to play as many games as I could, I think, just to get ready for the pro game. And at that time, the CHL was definitely more accustomed to the pro game, and it was going to prepare you better, right? So going to Seattle was a good decision for me. It was a hard decision at the time, and then like you said, it was the old Western League, and I remember my very first game was in Portland, and as you know, Seattle and Portland are big rivals, and there was, I think, 2 line brawls. There was about 4 guys left on our bench. I was only 16 at the time, hadn't turned 17 yet. This is my first ever Western League game. I had no idea what was going on. I think I had 2 goals in my first game too, which was crazy. Yeah, so I remember that was my first introduction to the old Western League, and it was definitely an eye opener for me.
That's crazy. Yeah, the line brawls. I still remember some of those from the Blazers days and having those go off. You played over 250 games in the WHL. But do you have a favorite moment? Scoring your first goal, of course, probably. But you spent some time down there. What was a kind of like a highlight moment for you?
It's I think it's overall, it's hard to pick one moment, but I think maybe some of our playoff times we had a couple of years where we had a couple good runs, and we always ended up running into Kelowna, unfortunately, and they were always a buzzsaw, and we could never get over the hump against the Kelowna Rockets. But yeah, I think probably what stands out maybe is my 20-year-old year. I had probably my best years, statistically, and just I really kind of like came into my own, I think, a little bit more in my 19 and 20-year-old year. And I don't know, it's hard because there's so many things that stand out. I mean, I think just the guys and the people and the friendships and the the people in the organization that I still keep in touch with. There's a couple guys that I still keep in touch with from junior, and Russ Farwell, another guy that is still involved with the Seattle Thunderbirds, and I still text with and talk to this day. So I think that's probably the highlight, is just being able to create some of those lifelong relationships that I have all the way back from my junior days is pretty special.
Any wild bus ride stories
uh,
that you could share, I guess?
Yeah, I think the wild bus ride story maybe is, I've definitely broken down a few times. We've had that where you're stuck on the highway somewhere in the middle of nowhere. That's happened for sure on road trips. We didn't have a sleeper bus being in Seattle, so you're laying out on the floor, you're laying out across across the seats, and it was crazy. I mean, the guys would bring all kinds of different sleeping bags and mats and all kinds of stuff to make sure that you're comfortable on the bus. And it was interesting. You look back on it now, and it's crazy. The stuff we did on that bus, and to be able to even sleep on the bus was wild. So yeah, it was just junior hockey. I will say, for kids, I mean, it creates a lot of toughness, because you have to go through a lot of hardship, I guess you could say, with whatever it is, with bus rides and all that kind of things, where it really kind of creates like I said, some adversity for yourself to make you better. So I miss my junior days. It was a lot of fun.
Well, on that topic of junior players and stuff, obviously the CHL and NCAA has kind of, it's been a big change. What are your kind of thoughts on that?
I'm okay with it. I think I knew this was going to be a matter of time. It's better for the players for sure. I think it gives them a little bit more of runway to make it, and it gives them a lot more options, some flexibility. I mean, you're seeing now Gavin McKenna, obviously, going to Penn State. I mean, obviously he's a different example, but I think that, for the players, I mean, it's a way for them to develop their game in a different way. I think, when you're playing in the CHL, you're getting to play a lot of games. You're getting to play more maybe the pro style game, I guess you could say. But, you go to college after a couple of years playing in the CHL, and, you're more likely to be playing men, right? Guys that are possibly in their mid-20s, fully developed. Granted, you're only playing 2 games a week, but, I think you're at the college level, you're able to train, you're able to work out more during the season. And, for those younger guys that are about to get drafted or have been drafted, I think that, you're developing your body, but I think it's helpful. I think you're going to be getting a lot more players, I think, from college hockey being drafted, a lot more players being maybe pro ready, coming from college hockey, where that didn't used to be the case. And I think that's going to happen a lot more now, I think, with these new rules and guys able to go to college, from the OHL or from the CHL rather.
Yeah, I think it's from a fan perspective. I also work for the Kamloops Blazers, but so without bias kind of being involved, I think it's fun. I think it's fun for the players. It's going to be interesting from a fan standpoint to see how everything kind of unfolds over the next few years and what we kind of see. But if you were 16 or 17 at that time, like, would you have gone to NCAA if you had that chance to kind of play a bit of both?
Absolutely. I think if I had that opportunity, I had that chance. I mean, if a team like Michigan or Boston College or Denver and one of those teams were knocking on my door when I was 17, 18 years old, I probably would have listened. So I think if those rules were there for us at that time, I think a lot of guys would have been jumping at that opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. Keeping on the WHL, what was your favorite barn?
My favorite barn. I'd probably have to say Kelowna or Kamloops. I think one of those. Both those are great junior barns. Just built for junior, good fans always. Kamloops and Kelowna always had good fans. So, those old Canadian, the Canadian towns that have their junior teams are pretty special to go to and play in.
Yeah. You're a 6th round draft pick by Boston. Was there a moment, I think, in your career as a young guy, did you kind of go, okay, I can make it to the NHL?
Yeah, I think it hit me, I think, in my first year in Seattle. Like I knew that I knew that I may possibly had a chance, but I think after my first year, my rookie year, I had a pretty good season. And I was playing with a lot of guys that I'm playing against and doing well. A lot of guys that have been drafted or that are going to be drafted that year after my rookie year. And I think that's when I knew. I was like, you know what, I can get drafted. Like I can play in the NHL. I'm right there with these guys. So I think that's when it hit me.
Who was the toughest player you played against in the WHL?
Toughest player I played against in the WHL. It's got to be. Shea Weber probably. He was right up there.
Yeah.
He was in Kelowna. And then I think Jordan Tutu was another one. He was obviously in Brandon. I didn't see him much, but when we did see him, he was one of those guys. I think in junior, probably one of the most feared players on the ice at the time, because the rules were a little bit different, and he was like a shark out there basically. So I think those two guys jump out, and then Shea Weber. He was. I got to play with him in the NHL in Montreal, and then played against him in junior. He was just a hard-nosed guy that, he didn't really change his game, obviously, as he got older. I think he's always kind of been the same, and he was one of those guys that's always hard to play against his whole career.
So you were, as I said, you were drafted by Boston. What kind of was the biggest challenge for you to kind of find your stride? And you eventually got in with the Islanders. What kind of was going on there for you?
I think it's just finding your game. I think every player goes through this. When you're drafted out of junior, when you're drafted out of college, you possibly at that time, you're more of a skilled player at the time. Maybe you're a top six guy on your team in junior or in college. But when you turn pro, you have to find ways, and you have to find your niche as a player, and what is that going to be if you're playing the NHL? And that's what I had to learn. I had to learn that, I'm not going to be a top six guy. I'm not going to be a skilled guy. Those guys are 0.001% in the NHL, those guys that are top six. So I had to learn that, I had to do all the little things. I had to do the intangibles. I had to win faceoffs. I had to kill penalties. Maybe I had to fight sometimes. Those things I had to learn in definitely my first few years pro in the minors. And it was really good for me. And it taught me how to be a good pro and how to be, the player that I was my whole career. So I think that was the big transition for me, was, finding my role and finding my way in the minors, to know that, if I want to play in the NHL one day, this is how I'm going to have to play. And that's what happened.
Oh yeah, you became a reliable bottom six gritty forward, right? And somebody that a lot of players would arguably model their game after, because that's the type of style you need to have to stick in, like you said. What is it like mentally and physically to kind of accept a new role like that and transition into that?
Well, it's funny. If I give you this funny story, is at the time, Scott Gordon was my head coach in Providence, and Scott Gordon's been around a long time. I had him in the with the Islanders as a head coach. He's been an assistant in the NHL for several teams, and he had a meeting with me and pulled me in the office and said, "Hey, listen, like, if you want to play top 6 minutes, you want to play and score a lot of points, all those things, like, you can." He's like, "But you're probably going to do it in the American League, and you'll make decent money. But if you want to like play in the NHL, and you do these things, and you be a bottom six guy, and you do the intangibles," he's like, "you could play for a really long time, and you'll probably make at least $1 million every year. You want to make $1 million?" And I said, "Yeah, I want to play in the NHL. Yeah, I do." And that honestly was our conversation, and that's how black and white he made it for me. And some players that have a hard time, being able to, morph their role or change their role. But, my dream was to play in the NHL, and it was pretty black and white for me what I had to do. So I did it, and I guess the rest is history.
Yeah, absolutely. The rest is history for sure. As cliche as a question as this is, what was scoring your first NHL goal like?
Incredible. I mean, I think I not a lot of people get to score their first NHL goal like I did.
Yeah.
I did it at MSG. It was shorthanded, and it was kind of a highlight reel goal as well. I knocked the puck out of the air, and we won the game. So it's funny because I mean, it's hard to forget my first goal because the way I did it at MSG, and for anyone that doesn't know, it was the night Barack Obama was elected the first time, so it was election night as well.
Right.
So yeah, so it was so New York City was going pretty crazy that night. So it was just definitely a night that I'll never forget.
Any other goals that kind of stand out to you? I know some guys are able to recall like every goal that they've ever scored. And is there anything else that kind of stands out to you?
Yeah, there's a couple. I scored a few overtime goals when the rules were different. It wasn't 3-on-3. I actually had 3 overtime goals in the regular season, which nobody really knows. And those were big ones. And then I think the big ones were like playoff goals. Like I had a playoff goal against Chicago, some good ones against Calgary and Nashville. I mean, those ones that just really jump out at me, I think, just because playoffs was some of the best times I've had over my playing career, and some moments and just fun, intense times that I'll never forget. So those goals really jump out at me too.
You spent 5 years with Tampa, and I kind of wanted to touch a little bit about this. What was a young Steven Stamkos like?
Um, not a whole lot different than he is now. Just a fun guy, a hard working guy. And the thing about Stammer too is, Stammer's always been so mature for his age. Even when he was young at 2021, he just had a good head on his shoulders and worked extremely hard. Just a really good pro and just a fun guy. I mean, it's hard to describe him any different because I feel like Stammer hasn't changed that much, and he's just the same guy he's always been. So, but just a great teammate, and he got to learn a lot. I mean, at the time when he was, I played with him, he was, 20, 21 years old when I first started playing with him. And, we all kind of grew up together. And he was fortunate enough to have a guy like Marty St. Louis on his line, and a guy that was teaching him and helping him the whole time. So I think that helped a lot. Having a guy like Marty around helped him with his game, his leadership, everything. So Stammer's a future Hall of Famer and one of the many guys that I feel fortunate enough that I got to play with.
I wanted to ask you about Marty St. Louis. What's he like being around, and how is he as a motivator? And is he a motivator?
Yeah, Marty. To put it this way, we weren't surprised when he ended up as a coach in the NHL.
Yeah, okay.
He was a coach when he played. When we were in the locker room, he'd be up on the whiteboard with his skates in his full gear in between periods, showing guys different things. And you better be listening too, because Marty's talking and we're watching. So he's a passionate guy, I think, and to be honest, probably the most influential teammate I played with. He just had this ability to make other players better around him and push you. He was one of those guys that I think, in my time in Tampa, I knew I had to find my niche as a player and knew that I had to find my role on that team. But Marty looked at me and knew that there was more. He knew that I could be even a better player. Not a lot of teammates are like that, that can look at a guy on his own team and say, hey, you can be even better. So I think that I'm just so grateful that I got to play with a guy like Marty. He was a great teammate, obviously Hall of Famer and a fun player, a fun guy to watch. I had the best seat in the house watching him. So he was just a great teammate and a guy that really, really helped me over the course of my career.
Any other moments with Tampa that kind of stand out? Because you were there for, like I said, 5 years, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, 5 seasons. I think just the year that we went on that run and we ended up losing to Boston in the conference finals in 7 games. That one really jumps out because I think for some of us it was our first ever playoff experiences. Like myself, Teddy Purcell, Steven Stamkos, Hedman, all these guys. We kind of grew up together. It was our first ever playoff experience, and I remember, first round, we're down 3-1 to Pittsburgh, and we ended up coming back. winning that series in 7 games, and we swept Washington in 4. And then we ended up winning the first game against Boston. So we essentially won 8 games in a row in the playoffs, which is like unheard of. And that was some of the most fun times I had, just because, you're with all your best buddies you're growing up with, and, be able to experience a playoff run like that, and, to be able to play a team like Boston in the conference finals, which was probably one of the hardest series I ever played in. And, just something special and something I'll never forget.
How come it was a hard series? Just because of the team?
Yeah, I think, Boston at that time was a big, rough team. They could kind of play. They could play any style. They were the best team in the league that year. The way they could play, they were mean. They'd make you pay in different ways, and they had a lot of guys that could back it up. They had a lot of big guys. They had Chara, they had Lucic. They had their fourth line of Thornton, Campbell, Pye. I mean, they were very, very good hockey club. So, just speaking all those guys is, self-explanatory, and
Yes.
how hard they were to play against.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so you went through 9 different NHL teams, I believe. How do you kind of balance coming into a new locker room? Were you able to kind of find yourself and, implement yourself into a team?
Yeah, that's a good question. And, those were definitely a lot of different scenarios and examples of my career that I had to learn. And I think, whenever I went to a new team or got traded, and it happened a lot more so towards the end of my career, was, I would still be myself. But for me, the biggest thing was, when a team or a general manager, coaches, or whoever, they trade for you and team, I always felt the need that I needed to go do something on the ice to earn guys' respect, whether it was have a good game, block some shots, maybe have a fight, whatever it is. And that was more so for me, like, okay, I need to like earn my place here on this team right away. Even though they traded for me, I still needed to, show them why I want to be a part of here. And that was kind of my first thing I want to do when I got to a new team, before even talking. I mean, I would obviously talk to everybody, but it would be that would be the most important thing. And then, when you go to a new team, there's always different dynamics in the locker room. There's this guy, the funny clown, or maybe this guy is introverted, or whatever, and I think I would just kind of sit back, watch, find the team dynamics, and go from there, because you can't be the same on every single team. Everyone's different. And I think it was good. It served me well. It taught me a lot, taught me how to, blend in, and also, be a leader for a team if they needed one. Because every team has their own leadership group. And when you come in, you don't want to rock the boat and be the rah guy. You still want to be respectful of what's going on and what they've built throughout the season. So, yeah, I learned a lot being traded as many times as I did, and finding ways to make myself important on every team that I got traded to.
Let's touch on Montreal for a moment, because you talked a lot about Shea Weber. How was it playing with him?
It was awesome. I mean, he ultimate captain, ultimate teammate, just an absolute warrior. I mean, the guy played through some serious injuries when I played with him. Injuries that eventually, ended his career. But he was one of those guys that just fun to be with, fun to be on the road with, good energy. But when it was time to work, when it was time to, show up and be the guy, or, and play hard, Webby was the first guy. Just like I said, I can't say enough about him. Obviously, he's already a Hall of Famer too. And he's, he was, one of my favorite teammates, and definitely, like I said, fortunate enough to play with a guy like that.
During your last few kind of years, did you have a favorite, or not a favorite spot, I guess, but a team that you kind of maybe wanted to play for, but you didn't end up getting the chance to?
Yeah, someone asked me this a couple weeks ago. I was a huge Red Wings fan growing up.
Okay.
And so I always, thought maybe I'd play for Detroit one day. Never did. And I was a huge Steve Yzerman fan. He was my favorite player growing up. So I guess that was a bit of a consolation because I got to play for him in Tampa, and he was a general manager, and he signed me to a couple contracts. So I guess that's a consolation of not getting to play for the Wings.
That's still cool though. Oh, that's awesome. Yzerman's the best. I mean, he was a little bit before my time, but I still got to see him, of course. But like, yeah, what a guy. Any moment like a fight kind of stand out to you? Is there a certain fight that stands out to you?
Ooh, in junior and pro.
Let's go with pro.
Let's go with pro. Okay. I mean, I'd say the one fight that probably stands out is I mean, maybe my last fight in the NHL. I fought Nathan Bastian from, I think he was in Seattle at the time, and it was one of my better fights. I was in Philly, and it was the beginning of the season in Philly, so the Flyers fans were loving it after that. Obviously, being in Philly, so that really made myself a lot more popular around Philly after that fight. So that's good.
Yeah, your play style and you fit into Philly quite well.
Yeah,
there.
it did.
That's for sure.
It was a good fit.
Is there a shift that you often think about, something that you can kind of go back in? And, I kind of asked you this about the goal already, but is there like a shift that you kind of think about where you're like, oh, that was an awesome moment for me?
Yeah, I think maybe there was a shift. I was playing with Kyle Palmieri and Andrew Cogliano in Anaheim, and I think Palmieri scored the goal, but it was a shift where I think myself and Cogliano, we were just down the offensive zone, a couple big hits, cycle the play. It was just a good, wholesome hockey shift, the offensive zone, where you kind of do everything and then you get rewarded with a goal. And I think, honestly, that might have been one of my best games I ever played in. It was game 1 of the conference finals against Chicago. I think I had a goal and 2 assists or something like that. So it was one of my better games. And I think, there was several shifts in that game where sometimes in hockey and pros and different guys will tell you where things all of a sudden become a little bit slower and things become a little bit easier when you're confident and playing well. And that was one of those games where everything felt pretty nice out there.
That's awesome. Who was the best chirper that you played with?
Ooh, the best chirper I played with. I'd have to say, maybe Scott Lawton. He was up there. Claude Giroux was pretty good too. And Claude Giroux was great because Claude Giroux would still chirp you even if he knew you. If you played with them, you chirp you if you're on the other team always. So, those guys are the ones that jump out, which is funny because they were both in Philly at the time. So, oh, sorry, I can't forget another Flyer guy. I'd probably put him up there now at first in the league. Him or Marchand would be Travis Konechny. That would probably be TK. Yeah, TK for sure, because he chirped me many a time. So
that's awesome. Okay, what would be one message you could send to yourself back in Seattle?
Enjoy every moment and don't take it for granted, not 1 second.
That's perfect. I just want to touch on one more thing, and that is the Alaska Aces. You got to play for them during the lockout in 2012, 2013. How cool was that for you?
It was awesome. It was one of those experiences and times in my life that I'll never forget because, I grew up, driving to the Sullivan Arena, which is the rink there, which is the arena there in Anchorage. And, I grew up watching, the Alaska Seawolves and the Aces. And for me, those were kind of my NHL teams back then because we didn't have an NHL team in Alaska. So, I grew up and that arena, Sullivan Arena, was kind of like my backyard. I used to run around that place, like I owned it. And to be able to play for the Aces like I did and, for my family to be able to just drive to the rink and watch me play, being at home was something I'll never forget and pretty special to be part of the Aces alumni.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there, let me word this correctly. The hockey development in Alaska, do you feel like it's on an uptick?
Yeah, I think it is. There's a lot more players coming out of Alaska than there is, I guess you'd say, in the past. But I think it's, like anywhere, it has to be. I'm trying to word this delicately. Players have to develop where they're at first before they leave. But I think sometimes players, leave a little bit too early. And I think that's happened in Alaska over the course of the years where players are leaving too early. And maybe it saturates and waters down the talent pool a little bit when you're, having guys leave so early and going to different places. So, Alaska is it's pretty incredible and pretty impressive actually for the amount of people that we have and the players that we pump out. It says a lot about coaching and where hockey is in Alaska. So I think it's in a good place because, like I said, we don't have near as amount of population of certain cities, and we're still pumping out some pretty good players. So it's cool to see.
Yeah, absolutely. Why don't you just kind of tell our viewers what your podcast is all about?
Yeah, it's called The Energy Line with Nate and JSB. It's through the NHL and iHeartRadio. You can get on any podcast wherever you listen to your podcast, Apple, Spotify, and yeah, we have a good time. We've had some really good guests on recently. We just had Aaron Ekblad on from the Florida Panthers, and we've had Mark Messier on, Jeremy Roenick, a few guys, and it's been fun. It's been a fun thing for me since being done playing. And Julie Stewart-Banks is great. She covered the Anaheim Ducks when I was playing there, so we're familiar with each other, and it's a great show. So if anyone's listening, come out and listen to the Energy Line with Nate and JSB.
Yeah, it's fantastic stuff. So I encourage everyone to go listen to it. Thanks so much, Nate, for doing this today. It was a pleasure to talk to you.
No problem. Thank you, Colton.
Well, Colton, thank you for another great episode this morning with Nate. Loved hearing that. Talked a lot about, or not a lot, but talked a little bit about Shea Weber and his time with the Habs there. So thankful. Nate obviously had a great NHL career. You talked a lot about it. It was kind of cool hearing about his favorite fight in the NHL, like the fight that stands out the most. I know Riley wanted to hear a lot about the Tampa Bay side, and you did touch a lot on Tampa Bay. What was your favorite part of that interview? Oh, you're still muted there, buddy.
Oh, we're good. Sorry, I was muted on my actual mic. No, I think my favorite thing was talking. I'm a big WHL guy, so I think it was reminiscing about his WHL times and just learning about what it was like to play in the jungle back in the days. But he had some great stuff on the NHL. It was fun to talk to him about his favorite fight and his first goal, and I think it was cool to touch on the Alaska Aces stuff because I think that was really special to him. So I loved that kind of part of it too. But overall, what a guy!
Yeah, great guy, great interview. We're gonna go to a quick commercial break. We'll be right back to wrap up the show after this.
Looking for a new way to quench your thirst? Game Day Tarps is now an official Quench affiliate. Head on over to quench.ca/GameDayTarps podcast and use our code GameDayTarps podcast, all caps, all one word, for 15% off your total order. Stay cool this summer with the #1 sports drink on the market. Stay quenched.
Is the off season bumming you out?
Yeah.
Do you wish you had more hockey content to consume?
Yeah.
Well, head on over to patreon.com/GameDayTarps and check out all the exclusive content we have to offer. Behind the scenes videos, in-depth analysis, and so much more. Select a membership tier and enjoy the content made only for you. Only at patreon.com/GameDayTarps.
Well, Colton, I just realized I'm going to have to edit that Quench ad 4 times a year now because it's not summer 4 times a year. I just realized that one. No, I wish it was.
Something popped up while we were recording, and I wanted to talk about it. So Dan Milstein tweeted Ilya Sorokin's agent. He tweeted that Ilya Sorokin has a full no trade clause and has never been a part of any trade discussions. So there goes the Islanders Sorokin trade rumors.
Yeah, I didn't think the Islanders would give up a guy like Ilya Sorokin, to be honest. He's kind of been on the uprise the last couple seasons, and he's probably, do I want to say this?
Maybe not.
I probably shouldn't say this. I was going to say he's probably the second best Russian goaltender behind Andrei Vasilevsky. Then I forgot about Sergei Bobrovsky. Then I thought people would get mad because I put him before Shesterkin. Now I'm like, I just put myself in a hole. So I'm going to retract everything I just said and put Sorokin 4.
Sorokin, there you go. Fair enough. We got Logan Stankoven coming on the show tomorrow live at 11:00/2 Eastern. So really looking forward to that. It's gonna be a great episode with Logan. Our last one with Logan went fucking horrible. So hopefully it's better this time around.
Yeah, just tell everyone upstairs to get off the Wi-Fi.
Yeah, I will. But yeah, I think that's fun. And we'll get Stank on. Broden Maywood in the chat. No Briz.
If it was 2014, we'd be talking about Briz probably, but
yeah,
not anymore.
Not anymore. Fair enough. But yeah, guys, Logan Stankoven live on GDT Live. That's a sentence. Wow. But tomorrow at 11/2 o'clock. Really looking forward to it, and we'll catch you guys then.